Good afternoon, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this special presentation by Direct Travel. We have just started to go live and I see the numbers climbing, so I'm going to give everyone a minute or two to log on, make sure that they can see their screens, that they can hear the commentary, and then we'll kick this off. Again, this is a special presentation by Direct Travel for our valued customers. By popular demand, I might add. A lot of our advisors who have met and had the chance to meet our presenter today in a previous engagement have recommended that we make this available to our valued customers, and I hope you will enjoy it as much as I will. I already know what's in store for us. Super excited to have you. While we're waiting for everyone to log on, a couple of housekeeping measures. My name is Renee Schneeberger. I'm Senior Vice President of Supplier Relations. I work with the valuable folks and partners that provide services to our guests on a regular basis, including the partner tonight, Micato Safaris, and our special guest presenter, which I will introduce in a moment. Super excited to have you on. This presentation will be recorded, is actually a recording already in progress, and will be shared with those who participated. If you, for some reason, cannot stay on the entire time, or you missed the beginning, you will be able to get a link to that recording and you can catch up. In terms of housekeeping measures, there are two buttons on the bottom of your screen. One is called Q&A, and that is the button we would like you to use to post your questions. We will address those questions at the end of the webinar. You will hear a lot of the information and maybe even some of your answers throughout the presentation that's in front of us. But it's helpful for you to use the Q&A. The chat feature is deactivated. We do not use that component for questions, so please use the Q&A. And it's always nice if you let us know who you are and where you're writing from, so that we can appropriately address your question and provide answers that are useful to you. Again, welcome to this special presentation with Direct Travel. We are here with Micato Safaris and with a very special guest. We are thrilled to introduce James Currie to you. James is a North American sales and a new development manager for the Great Plains Conservation, an African wildlife conservation organization, a lifelong wildlife enthusiast, and most importantly, an elephant expert, which is what brings us to the topic of the Big Tuskers today. He's an author and a native of South Africa, which you will hear in a moment based on his lovely accent. James, it's a pleasure to have you on today. Thanks for joining us. Before we get going, though, a quick survey. We are curious to know if any of you have been on an African safari. That poll should pop up on the screen right about now, and we kindly ask you to answer. It gives us a sense to ascertain who's on the call today, and make sure that we adequately elaborate on that topic. I just want to say I am a passionate traveler. Many of our clients and our advisors who assist you throughout the year planning your vacations and experiences are similarly passionate about what they do. And there is never been a better time to travel, especially after the last few years of challenging circumstances where borders were closed and countries were closed to visitors. That has now all ended. It seems like when you travel at airports, everyone's on the go. And if you haven't made plans yet, this is the perfect time to make plans for a couple of reasons. One is Africa is a dream destination for many. It is a much more approachable and an achievable destination than many travelers think. That's part of why we're doing this presentation today, to break things down for you. Number two, it's only going to get more challenging, and I see the bulk of guests on the call today have never been to Africa and have not done a safari, which is great. So I hope you find this interesting today. And a safari is much more tangible than you think. It is not camping on rocks and hard floors. It is actually quite luxurious these days, from the vehicles, the camps that we use, the places where you get to stay and enjoy the wildlife and see Africa. But really, Africa is extremely popular amongst those who've been. The repeat factor is quite high. And the longer you wait, the more challenging it will be to get the space in the trip that you want to take, because many of these lodges are 12, 14, 20 cabins at most, or tents at most. And so the popular ones fill up very quickly. And so this is a perfect time to think about maybe even later this year. There is still some space for October, November, and into the holiday season. Remember, if the further south in Africa you go, you're on the opposite climatic zone. So summer in South Africa is our winter in the Northern Hemisphere. So from a weather perspective, it's ideal. And number two, the longer you wait, the more costly it will probably get, because airfares, unfortunately, are headed up, not down. And many of the lodges, when they're full, have higher pricing as well. So it's a great time. Get your family together. This is a multi-generational destination. For those of you who love to bring your grandkids and kids along, it is really one of those things that builds memories for a lifetime. And without further ado, then I will turn it over to you and let you take it from here. So James, the microphone and the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Renee. Really appreciate it. Good evening, everybody. As Renee introduced to you, I am James Currie, and I am a lifelong wildlife enthusiast. I'll tell you a quick story before we start. I actually began my interest in wildlife from a very young age, when I took a major interest in birds, actually, and started my sort of wildlife interest with birds. And my parents owned a restaurant in Kirstenbosch National Botanical Gardens in Cape Town, one of the most beautiful cities in South Africa. And it was there that I got interested in wildlife, and particularly in birds. And then I got to around the age of 12 or so, and, you know, started dating and getting into the social scene. And it was the quickest way to end a conversation with a young lady was when she asked you, well, what do you like to do? And I said, oh, I'm a bird watcher. Well, that was the end of that date. And the lady would promptly be asked to be taken home and would disappear. And so I became a closet bird watcher for many, many years, until I got into my late teens, when I went to university and really got into wildlife and bird watching again. And I thought, oh my gosh, if I'm ever going to find a beautiful woman one day, I'm probably going to have to look at something a little bit more interesting than birds. And so I embarked and became a safari guide. And that was where my love of elephants was forged. And so I'm going to take you on a little journey this evening on the genesis behind my film, which is called Last of the Big Tuskers. And it was a film that we brought out in late 2018. And it really features the last super tusker elephants on our planet. So I'm going to take you on a little bit of a journey this evening for about 45 minutes, and then we'll take some questions after that. It really started with a photograph, actually two different photographs. This particular photograph was shown to me by a friend living here in South Florida. I live in South Florida now, but I'm a native of South Africa. And this photograph was taken in 1970 in the Marsabit region of northern Kenya. And it's an iconic photograph for a couple of reasons. Number one, it features two, not just one, but two of the largest elephants, the largest tusker elephants ever to grace our planet. And secondly, because it's not just featuring a large tusker elephant, which are increasingly rare these days, but two of them together in this beautiful symmetrical pose. And these two elephants were named Ahmed and Muhammad. And they lived in Kenya from about the 1920s all the way through into the 1970s. And what's interesting is that the elephant in the background, who was named Ahmed, is the only elephant ever to have been given presidential decree. And because hunting and poaching was so rife, especially for ivory in the 1970s, the president of Kenya at the time, President Kenyatta, he ascribed presidential decree to Ahmed the elephant. And that meant that he was followed 24/7 by armed guards for the last years of his life. These two armed guards stayed with him right up until his death. So he got presidential decree in 1970. This photograph of these two magnificent bull elephants was taken in 1970. And then in about 1974, the two armed guards one evening were following Ahmed, following his usual route in the Marsabit forest, and he disappeared for the evening into a copse of trees. And the two guards waited outside because it was a small copse of trees, and they knew that given his past habits, he would just come out of the copse of trees in the morning and they would follow and be with him again. Well, the morning came and the sun rose, and Ahmed never came out of the forest. He never came out of that copse of trees. And the two armed guards were thinking, wow, this is very strange. And it got to about midday, late morning, and they decided to venture into the copse of trees. And it was there that they found Ahmed sitting upright, almost like a human being, resting on his two large pillars of ivory and leaning up against a tree. And he had passed away like that. And I like to tell this story because it's a very rare privilege these days that an elephant with ivory of that size gets to pass away naturally. And when I was shown this photograph by a friend of mine, I was absolutely moved by this image. And today, Ahmed, his tusks and his likeness now stands in the Museum of Natural History in Nairobi in Kenya, and you can go and see this magnificent elephant. When he passed away, his tusks weighed just shy of 150 pounds each side when he passed away. So he was an absolutely magnificent bull elephant. And today, when you think of big tuskers in Africa, a big tusker is an elephant that has at least one tusk heavier than 100 pounds. And so it can either be both tusks or it can be the single tusk, but at least one of them must weigh at least 100 pounds or more. When I started the film in 2014, there were about 40 super tuskers left in Africa. And when I finished the film in late 2018, only 22 remained. And it's a great tragedy because just, 60, 70, 80 years ago, there were hundreds, if not thousands, of super tuskers across the continent of Africa. Here's another beautiful front-on image of Ahmed, that magnificent Kenyan elephant, also taken by a friend of mine. And when I saw these images, it got me wondering how many of these super tuskers are left in Africa. And I started doing a little bit of research, and eventually I worked at a place called Pinda Private Game Reserve in northeastern South Africa. And I used to spend a lot of time during my off days venturing to a magnificent park called Tembe Elephant Park, right on the border of Mozambique. This is the last indigenous herd of elephants in the KwaZulu province of South Africa. And there's probably only about 250 to 300 elephants in this park. And they've now been protected from poachers and hunters. And it was while I was there that I started this research into figuring out, are there any more of these big tuskers and where are they to be found? And it was then that a very good friend of mine who still lives at Pinda Game Reserve today showed me an image of an elephant from Tembe Elephant Park that made my jaw completely drop to the floor. His name was Isilo, which is the Zulu name and the Zulu word for King of Kings. He was a magnificent bull elephant, and I knew right there and then that I had to go and film him. And I got a grant and some funding from the Discovery Channel, who were trying to do a series called Last Chance to See, which was basically a series that would focus on those last things on our planet that we have to see before they're gone forever. So think the pyramids in Egypt, think the Great Barrier Reef, think super tusker elephants or big tuskers. And so we got a film crew together and we headed out in 2014 to Tembe Elephant Park to see if we could locate this magnificent bull elephant called Isilo. He was an absolutely mammoth elephant in his prime. In his prime, he stood 13 foot at the shoulder and he weighed 7 tons. And after 3 days of searching for this elephant in the park, we looked everywhere for him. We couldn't find him. Time was running out. We knew that he was old as well, which made the urgency even more important. And this was my first interaction with Isilo, the elephant.
Come on, this way. This way. Look, here he comes. Isilo's right next to the tent. Right next to the tent. When you are this close, you realize how tiny you are. I mean, he stands nearly 13 feet high. That is more than double my height. And he's 7 tons in weight. There's a massive elephant. We've been looking for him all day, and Isilo came to us.
At first light, he was still nearby.
Hi, Isilo. Come. We need to be very careful with this elephant. Oh, here he is. He's right behind the corner. Look. Oh my gosh. Even though he's old, he can still be incredibly quick.
Amazingly, even though Isilo was fully aware of me, he showed no sign of aggression as he kept browsing.
Look at the power of this guy. Wow. He has 7 tons of elephant. What a magnificent animal.
He comes here, he knows there's people here, so he's not here to bother people. So if you come too close to him, he will give you a frat just to say, back off. But otherwise, he's a very calm elephant. Now and again, he goes and destroys maybe a tent, but not on purpose. If he's eating and the tent is on his way, he might just lean on it a little bit. But it's not on purpose to destroy all man-made things.
The gentle giant wandered out of the rest camp the way he came in, stepping over the flattened perimeter fence, unperturbed by us, back to his forest home.
So that was the first time that I saw this magnificent bull, and I went back to the States armed with this amazing footage. And for various reasons, the spec that we had done for Discovery Channel didn't happen, and I purchased the footage from them, from the producers of the film, because I knew that this was an important conservation story that had to be told. And so I wanted to do a film on how many of these super tuskers remained. And very sadly, 6 weeks after I returned to the United States, I got a call from Tom Mahambo, who was featured at the end of that clip, my Zulu friend who worked at Tembe Elephant Park, to let me know that Isilo had disappeared and could not be found anywhere. And so we asked if we could send out a search party, and we were denied by the park headquarters. We asked if we could, at our expense, put up a helicopter to look for Isilo, and we were denied by the park headquarters. And eventually I flew back to South Africa, and Tom Mahamba went and looked for the carcass on his own without permission. And the carcass was found about 2 kilometers from the park headquarters. He had died in a stand of sand forest, a beautiful, beautiful forest. And tragically, his ivory was not there. It had been removed by poachers and was probably shipped off to somewhere in the Far East. The reason why this is such an incredible tragedy is that this was the largest set of ivory estimated to be in Africa in the last 50 years, probably. His ivory was estimated to weigh between 160 and 165 pounds each side. His ivory was estimated to be anywhere from 10 to 11 foot long. His ivory touched the ground. This was an elephant whose ivory had been earmarked to stand at the entrance to one of our international airports, Durban International Airport in South Africa. It was, and still remains, an iconic piece of our South African heritage, this elephant. And his ivory had disappeared. It wasn't that long ago when super tuskers like this were fairly common throughout Africa and were hunted to the point now where they, of this size, are almost extinct, with only 22 that we know of remaining on the continent of Africa. But ivory like this in this photograph was very common throughout Africa in the 1930s, 1940s, and 1950s. And as I started making the film, we started looking at another even more alarming trend, which was that the gene for ivory itself in elephants was disappearing. In any healthy elephant population, there's about 3% of the elephants that do not have tusks. Now, an elephant can survive without tusks, especially being a herd animal, they can, but it's very difficult for them. It's like humans walking around without arms. They need their tusks for a variety of functions, like digging for water in dry riverbeds, for, using them bulldozer-like to lift their babies out of the mud. They use their tusks to pry the bark off trees, and they use their tusks to dig for roots. And of course, they use their tusks for defense as well. And so when we started looking at what was happening across Africa, we started realizing that not only are the super tusker elephants disappearing, but elephants with tusks are disappearing as well. And in certain populations across Africa, Gorongosa National Park in Mozambique, 66% of the elephants are completely tuskless. In Queen Elizabeth National Park in Uganda, about 30% of the elephants have no ivory. And very alarmingly, but understandably, because the elephants in Addo Elephant Park in South Africa only came from a small handful of very small tusked animals, the population there is over 90% completely tuskless. And as I'm playing this brief video of a herd of elephants in Addo Elephant Park, it got me thinking while I was making this film, is this how I want my grandchildren and my grandchildren's children to see elephants in Africa? Without ivory, completely tuskless, handicapped? And so the film delved into tusklessness in elephants, but also I found out that there was a hidden population of elephants in Kenya where big tuskers still remained. Yes, Tembe Elephant Park has got a handful, maybe 1 or 2 super tuskers, but where were the last remaining 40 when I started making the film? And my journey took me to the greater Amboseli ecosystem in Kenya, the single largest population of super tuskers left on our planet today is found right here in Tsavo West and Tsavo East National Parks, and also in Amboseli National Park, which ranges right up into the Chulu Hills area of Kenya. It's a very beautiful part of Kenya. It's a part of Kenya that for 8-9 months of the year gets bone dry, and elephants rely on water sources. And it's a massive, massive area. So looking for super tuskers in this particular area is like looking for needles in a haystack, but they do exist. And when we ventured up with our film crew to Amboseli, we were very fortunate to come across an incredible elephant called Tim, a beautiful, beautiful big tusker. And we were very lucky that he was accompanied at the time by another young super tusker called Craig. And these elephants used to venture out of Amboseli National Park every afternoon during the dry season to go and look for the succulent crops in the villages. And it was there that they came into conflict with people, because obviously people's livelihood was at stake. And these two big elephants would walk out of the park, and they would be accompanied by a bunch of younger bulls. And the younger bulls are called askaris. And an askari is a Swahili word which means warrior. And these younger bulls basically devote themselves to these older big tusker bull elephants, and they guide these big tuskers through the last years of their life. It's a wonderfully touching part of elephant society that we're only just starting to learn more about. And these young bulls will protect the older bulls with their lives sometimes. And one's got to ask the question, what is in it for these younger bulls? Why would they devote so much time to guiding these old elephants whose senses are failing, their eyesight is getting weak, their sense of hearing is not what it used to be, and even their sense of smell has diminished? And these big tuskers are on their last set of teeth. So they can no longer feed on a lot of the rough bark and roots of trees that elephants need for their nutritional habits. And so these young bulls guide these old bulls through the last years of their lives. And it's believed that in return, the older bulls, with all their knowledge, all their wisdom, and all the social graces that they've learnt over the years, being a male elephant in elephant society, that these traits and this wisdom is passed on to these younger bulls to show them what it's like to be a good bull in elephant society. And so we journeyed up to Amboseli, and were very fortunate to get some amazing footage of these magnificent bulls with their askaris.
Tim, now the largest of the remaining tuskers in Amboseli, was recently fitted with a radio collar. He knows we are here. His askaris have warned him, and he hides his tusks. This behavior has been widely reported by scientists. It's as if the tuskers know the danger of exposing their ivory to humans.
These are all the askaris, the front guard. And always you'll find Tim behind, because these are the boys that are protecting him with their lives sometimes. The size of those tusks. That's huge. Wow.
your first time to see them?
Yes.
This is your first time to see them. This one. This is Craig. The second one. This one here. Call it Craig. This is a very, very nasty elephant. Very harsh.
With no more than 25 Big Tuskers alive today, it's a huge privilege to see Tim and Craig together. Tim is substantially larger and appears almost mammoth-like. Craig, younger and quite edgy, is already a 100-pounder, with the potential to grow into a truly massive super tusker. But they are both in danger. They are miles outside the protective boundary of the park. It's not hard to understand why these elephants have become crop raiders. This part of the park is unfenced, and a concentration of succulent irrigated crops just nearby would be hard to resist in these drought conditions.
And so we spent some wonderful weeks filming the Super Tuskers of Kenya. Sadly today, Tim has also passed away. Throughout his life, he had numerous run-ins with, or close calls with humans. He was speared a couple of times. He was shot with arrows, and on a couple of occasions, he had to be darted and treated because of his run-ins with people. But nothing could keep this bull from venturing out the park and venturing into maize fields, and succulent spring onions and people's gardens were too much of an attraction to him to keep him within the boundary of the park. And thankfully, he did pass away of natural causes at a ripe old age, and his ivory was somewhere in the region of 120 pounds. A really, really beautiful bull. And today, still in Amboseli, his friend Craig still roams that park today, the younger bull that was with him in that clip. And I'm just showing this particular image because I want to share something with you about the importance of elephants, the importance of elephants to me, but I believe the importance of elephants to us as society is that we can learn so much from them. You would struggle to find anywhere in the world an animal that looks more different to us, but yet an animal species that is more akin or alike us. They're so similar to us in so many ways. Elephants live to roughly the same ages as we do in captivity, where elephants' diets can be supplemented. They can live to a ripe old age of about 80, but in the wild, generally around 65, 70. They go through puberty at roughly the same ages as we do. They've got incredible memories. Elephants have memories which probably are stronger than ours as human beings. And they also show remarkable empathy. They show sadness without a doubt. And it's very tough because often as scientists and as researchers and as conservationists, we're sometimes criticized for anthropomorphizing, which means putting human qualities onto animals. But if there's one creature that you can put human qualities onto, it is without doubt elephants. And so they show this empathy, they show these remarkable family and social bonds, and they show that they have got a very intricate language as well. We're just starting to scratch the surface of the depths of elephant language. A recent study from Kenya showed that elephants are actually able to discern the differences in human dialects. And they took a population of elephants that lived alongside the Maasai people and alongside a people called the Kamba people in Kenya. And they both live in this area. The Maasai men, in particular, the warriors, are very hostile towards elephant, whereas the Kamba people live in harmony with elephants. And so they did an amazing test by playing the noises or the voices of women Maasai and kids that were from the Maasai tribe on loudspeakers to this herd of elephants, and they would remain completely calm. They then played the voices of Kamba women and children, and the elephants would remain completely calm. And then they played the voices of Kamba men, and the elephants remained completely calm. And then they played the voices of Maasai men, and the elephants stampeded in panic and fear. And they did these experiments over and over again to find that they would be able to recognize those subtle differences in human voices time and time again. And it always astounds me that we're only now beginning to learn their language. They know ours, and yet we kill them indiscriminately. And so not only are elephants similar to us in so many ways in which they communicate and their social bonds, but they're also one of the few creatures on our planet that are self-aware. And to test for self-awareness in animals, you take a paintbrush or a marker and you paint a colored dot on an animal's face, and then you show it a mirror, or you show the animal its reflection, and you see the reaction. Now, if you do that with cetaceans, which are whales and dolphins, and you paint a pink dot on its head, and the dolphin swimming in an aquarium and sees its reflection, it'll try to rub that pink dot off its face because it demonstrates self-awareness. Humans, obviously, you look in a mirror and you see a dot in your face, you can wipe it off. If you show it to what we think are very intelligent animals like lions, baboons, primates, lower primates, they will look at that mirror and they'll either charge at it or run away. The only creatures that demonstrate self-awareness are cetaceans, whales, and dolphins, the higher apes, which are bonobos, chimpanzees, gorillas, and orangutans, and elephants. And so they really are remarkable creatures that also, crazily enough, show the ability to mourn. And I always heard this, and I never had really seen it in practice until we went and filmed Isilo's carcass about a year and a half after he passed away. And when we'd first found the carcass, it was just a pile of bones and flesh in the middle of this sand forest. But when we came back, many, many months later, we found something incredible. And this is an aerial photograph of his bones. But if you notice on this picture, you'll see a clear elephant path in and out to his carcass. And these paths were never there before. So if you look at a before photograph of his carcass, it was just a pile of bones and flesh. And a year and a half later, the rest of the elephants of Tembe showed him such reverence. He was such a well-known elephant that the other elephants of Tembe made a special effort to come and visit and mourn his death, which is indicated by these paths going in and out. And lastly, elephants are also mischievous. And this was something that I found when filming Tim and his bunch of Ascaris in Amboseli National Park. It was absolutely remarkable because we had this dedicated path that we knew that they followed every single evening, like clockwork, to get outside the park into the villages. And so our film crew placed 2 cameras on the ground on either side of that path so that we could get all those Big Tuskers and Tim walking between the cameras and get this angle from the ground looking up at them. And what we found was absolutely incredible because elephants are not only remarkably intelligent, but they can also be very mischievous. And I'm going to show you a side-by-side clip of both these cameras on either side of the path. These elephants should be walking directly between them. But look what happens. That lead elephant has just veered off the path. He saw the cameras. They're very camera shy. There's the big bull Tim coming behind with the large ivory. And they veer off the path behind the front of the cameras.
Even that one, that another one.
Wow.
Are they?
He ate our camera.
What happened here? What happened here?
The two, they come back.
Tell me what happened.
Oh dear. They chewed the camera, really, to be honest.
They took it for how far? 100 meters.
They said, why this thing here? Let us take this one.
Oh my goodness.
Both of them.
Both of them. Oh my God.
And so that just shows you the remarkable intelligence of elephants. It shows you their mischievousness as well. And I'd like to just close with a little bit of a bright side to the story, because, you know, it sounds all gloom and doom what we've done to elephants. And yes, it's absolutely tragic what we have done to them. It's tragic that elephants have now had to adopt a form of human-induced evolution to stop their destruction, because they basically are losing their ivory, because it's the only way that they will survive into maybe the 21st century with any kind of regularity. And so it's very sad, but at the same time, there's hope. And through our film, with 22 super tuskers remaining, we're now hoping to isolate the gene for large ivory in elephants and be able to test for that gene through a dropout dart. And once we can isolate that gene, we can then take a young bull elephant, we can safeguard him, we can move him into another area where perhaps there are a lot of tuskless elephants. We can now move him into that area and hopefully perpetuate the gene for ivory in African elephants. So there is hope at the end of the story. There are places in Africa where you can still go and see these absolutely magnificent beasts. One of them is in the Chulu Hills of Kenya, that greater Tsavo ecosystem. The other area is Tembe Elephant Park, although there's precious few tuskers there now, probably only one or two left there. But in that Tsavo Amboseli ecosystem, there's still probably about a dozen of these large tuskers remaining. And so I'd like to thank you all for joining me on this little journey about the Super Tusker elephants of Africa. You can watch the film on Vimeo. Just Google Last of the Big Tuskers on Vimeo. And of course, I'm going to hand over to Paddy now from Micato to tell you where you can see the last remaining Big Tuskers in Africa and how.
Hey, James, thank you very much. This was a fantastic presentation, great style. I have a quick survey for guests participating in the webinar, and then we'll turn it over to Paddy. If the survey can be launched, that would be great. What we want to know is where the best places are to see elephants, Big Tuskers especially. So if you listen to James's careful presentation, you get a pretty good idea of what the answer is. And while we're waiting for folks to participate and answer, I'll introduce Paddy Buffalono, who is with Micato Safaris. We have worked together for many, many years, and Paddy is the perfect person to tell you more about how to make this an accessible experience. Paddy, over to you.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Renee. And thank you, James. That was just, amazing. I've been to Africa many times, but I could get on an airplane right now and go see those elephants again. And like Renee said at the top of the talk, it really is accessible. There are nonstop flights from New York to Nairobi. It's only 14.5 hours, and you can wake up in Kenya. So, but we don't have that much time today. In fact, we just have a little bit of time. It's almost the top of the hour. So I'm going to take you on a very quick trip that has been designed exclusively for direct travel, where you can see the Big Tusker elephants if you are lucky. So the trip begins in Nairobi. And let's see, my screen is not quite advancing here, but there we go. So Nairobi is the capital of Kenya. So as soon as you land, you are met by a Micato airport representative. Right when you get off the airplane, you're whisked through customs and immigration so you can get right to your hotel, which is Hemingway's, which is in the outskirts of Nairobi in the beautiful hills, and it's an all-suite property, so you can quickly get into your room and enjoy the evening. In the morning you get up, and Nairobi's interesting because it's a city. It's the commercial center of East Africa. It's the government center of East Africa, but it also has a huge national park right in the city. And so your time in Nairobi is all about the wildlife. You can get up close and personal at Giraffe Center with these beautiful gentle giants. Some people don't like to get that close, but many people do. And then you can go to the David Sheldrick Wildlife Trust. So here they have elephants that have been orphaned. Maybe something has happened to the elephant baby and they've been rescued, or something may have happened to their mother. So they're brought to the trust and they're cared for, and you would be there for the feeding of the baby elephants. It's just something everybody loves. And then you'll meet the founders of Micato Safaris, Felix and Jane Pinto, who meet every guest who comes through Kenya. And then, but everyone's excited to get out in the bush. So the next morning, you'll take a plane to the Chulu Hills, which is in the foothills of Mount Kilimanjaro. And I just hope everybody's first landing in this area is as beautiful as this. And this, of course, as I think people did pretty well in the polls, this is the land of elephants and some Big Tuskers as well. Your home is at Oldanya Lodge, and this is nestled between Savo and Amboseli, which are the greatest places to see the elephants. This is a private reserve in that area, and the rooms have actually just been redone, so they're even more beautiful than this. And what is, not only is it lovely, but it has majestic views out these windows from everyone's room of Mount Kilimanjaro. And if you get tired of that, you may want to relax in the pool. And you can see over here on the left is the watering hole. James mentioned how they're always looking for water, and there is a water source at the lodge, so it does attract a lot of elephants. And if you like stargazing, you might want to sleep out under the stars in the star bed, which is really a very special thing. And one thing that I really love is that there's a hide here. So this is actually, you can see on the left here, you can just really observe the watering hole all day long and see the elephants. And it's not always just about the big guys. The little ones steal everyone's heart, and is like you saw, they're so mischievous. And I love how the elders are always kind of, what's the word? Not punishing them, but sort of disciplining them, which is so much fun to watch. But there's a lot of other game as well. There's plains game, there's monkeys, baboons. On my last trip there, I was lucky enough to spend about a half hour following these 3 cheetah brothers around. And if you want to get out of the vehicle and get more active, there are mountain bikes there. And if you want to be a little less active, but enjoy the Chulu Hills, you can have a massage on the deck of the spa there as well. So your time will be short. You'll not want to leave, but I assure you, you'll be happy once you land in Laikipia, which is in northern Kenya. It's above the equator. And every time you come to a new location, you're greeted with coffee and tea, biscuits, and often amarula, which is known as the elephant's party drink. The terrain in northern Kenya is very different. A lot of people describe it as being very similar to the American Southwest. And what I love about it is you see varieties of game that you just don't see in the other parks in Kenya. You'll see grevy's zebra, reticulated giraffes, and one of my favorite are the standing gerenuk. I just love that these guys get on their hind legs to enjoy their meals. They're a lot of fun to watch. Your home there is Loisaba Tented Camp. So this is a tent. It is so, kind of a minimalist decoration, but beautiful and large, much bigger than many New York City apartments I've lived in. But my favorite thing is the view. You can just enjoy this, beautiful view over the valley here. In this area, there is a lot of other activities that are offered in addition to game viewing. You can go on camel treks, mountain bike rides, and even go running with a local Samburu warrior. My husband's a lifelong runner. He will tell you that running with the Kenyans is the highlight probably of his running career, but an absolute highlight of the trip as well. And going to see the Samburu tribe. I mean, I think they are just the most exquisitely adorned of all the African tribes. And some people like just to kind of relax by the pool and take in this beautiful view. So then we're going to head off again from Laikipia down to the Masai Mara here. And you will have a very warm greeting when you land. And this is Kenya's crown jewel. This is really the Africa that people dream of. It's where the movie Out of Africa was filmed. It's the land of sweeping vistas. It's the land of the Great Migration, but it's also the land of cats. You will see male lions. You will see prides of lions. You will see lion cubs. You'll see lions in love, and you will see cheetah. And if you're lucky, you will see the elusive leopards as well that are just so beautiful, those eyes. In addition, there are many varieties of antelope and of course more elephants. And if you're lucky, you'll even catch a rainbow as well. Your home in the Masai Mara is Great Plains Mara Plains Camp. And this lodge is so beautiful. And not only is it just physically beautiful, when you're staying at a Great Plains camp, they are all about conservation. So they're giving back all the time. Conserving animals is their #1 priority. You might not want to leave. It's very tempting to stay. It's so beautiful, but very rarely do people miss or skip game drives. We're in the Masai Mara. We do try to make an effort to stop every afternoon to have a little sundown or cocktail. It may be very casual, so you can just kind of stop and just take in the scenery. And sometimes we have a little bit more elaborate cocktails where you can stop at sunset and just enjoy that sun as it sinks down into the horizon. And one of the highlights of every safari in the Masai Mara is the hot air balloon trip over the Mara. You launch just as the sun comes up and you just float quietly over the Mara, and you see animals below and the scenery. But what I love is just the quiet that you hear. It's the most peaceful thing. Most peaceful place I feel like I've ever been. And I know everyone is always sad to leave, but when they go back to Nairobi, we kind of focus more on the people. So Micato has a not-for-profit foundation called America Share. And the mission of America Share is to educate children in Africa. And this is the Harambee Center, which is a multi-use facility in the heart of Kenya's Nairobi slum. And this facility has the library, it has a research center, it's a gathering place. And for every guest who goes on safari, we send a child to school. And this is the Kwajenga School in Mukuru. And these children are sent to school because of guests who go on safari. And I assure you, it is not depressing. It is an exciting visit. It's a happy visit. The children are spirited. They love to see visitors. And most people do mark this as one of the absolute highlights of their trip. So when you travel with Micato, you're in good hands. We're the world's most awarded safari company. We've won the Travel and Leisure World's Best Award a record 10 times. No other safari company has done that. You have a Micato Safari director with you every step of the way to personalize your trip. You have your concierge staff as well to take care of all the little details. And our trips are 100% inclusive. You never reach into your wallet. All of the meals are included, beer and wine with meals, gratuities, laundry, you name it. We have a large team there to take care of everything that you could possibly be hoping for. And if you do book a Micato Safari, and I see a lot of people have not yet been on a safari, and those of you who've been, I know you want to go back, you book through direct travel on any trip, not just this trip, but you will receive a complimentary $250 gift certificate to our online safari store, so you can look safari chic. And I promise you that if you travel with Micato on safari, you will see amazing wildlife. You will see beautiful vistas and beautiful scenery. You will meet fascinating people. And most importantly, you will change a child's life with an education. So I thank you. And if you want more information about how to travel to Africa, if you want to hear about this very special itinerary, your direct travel advisor can help you every step of the way.
And Patty, I'll come back on. Thank you very much for this succinct and beautifully presented detail of this exclusive trip for direct travel. But there are so many more itineraries and options. With Micato, our advisors are happy to help you customize and have those conversations to build the dream trip for you. But one has to remember, when you go to Africa, you're not just making a difference in your own life, you're making a difference in people's lives, Educating a child is one thing, preserving wildlife, giving people economic basis so they have less reason to go poach and kill in order to survive is another big element of this. And I think we can all play a role in making sure that elephants survive longer than the next century and are visible for future generations to explore and enjoy. I personally am touched too by the intelligence and the elements that James pointed out. They're not just animals that we can go watch. They have their own social structure, their own community structure. And maybe we can even learn something from them that could apply to our human life. So I want to thank you all for participating today, for joining this direct travel special presentation with James Currie and Patty Buffalona. Thank you very much for your time. It has been recorded. The recording will be made available. And if you missed a portion of it, you can either watch the beginning or the end, or of course the whole thing. And feel free to share that with your friends and family, because I believe, as does Patty as well, traveling with your loved ones, with friends, is even more rewarding than going by yourself. Seeing this wildlife from so many angles with your favorite people in the world is even more memorable. So we can do trips for as few as 1 or 2 people going to as many as 15 or 20 people going. Some of the lodges, as I mentioned at the beginning, have limited amounts of rooms, so there is a maximum size to a group to make it enjoyable, but it is a great experience to have traveling with other folks that you already know. Without further ado, then, thank you very much. Enjoy the evening, and till a future presentation. Thank you so much for your time. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.